Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the TV Pilots license flight number 71 with service to New York and your locally owned bookstore. We ask that you please fasten your headphones, secure your podcasting device, and remember, hey you, yeah, you listening to this podcast, we're watching you.
Welcome to the TV Pilots license. My name is Jeff Curvis, joined by Max Singer and Rich Inman. How you boys doing today?
Rich, you put your logoless hat back on right now. I want everyone watching this on the YouTube feed to be so uncomfortable. I want it. Yeah, there we go. God, I hate looking at this video feed right now so much.
So, are we superheroes or are we stalkers? That's my big question.
No, we're every celebrity trying to exist in West Hollywood right now.
That's called quiet luxury, baby.
I'm just trying to go to Erewhon and, buy my $55 cabbage,
You can't.
All right, question of the week. What's the dumbest thing you've bought at Erewhon?
Oh.
Well, boys, this week we are talking about the Netflix show known as You. But before we dive too deep into this show, Max, do you mind telling folks what this podcast is all about?
Here at TV Pilots License, we break down and analyze the pilot episodes of some of TV's most famous, or in some cases, infamous shows. We learn a little more about how these shows came to be and were originally made, if they're effective pilot episodes and making us want to watch more, and if we think they could be made today. Go back and stream our old episodes from wherever you get podcasts. Check us out on YouTube to see our smiling faces and logoless hats. And if it is your... And if it is your first time flying with us, then welcome aboard.
Hey, you know what? I will say one thing about these logoless hats. It could be me under here. It could be Jacob Elordi under here. You don't know. You don't know.
Well, Rich, I am curious. What is your question of the week this week?
So it's interesting that you said it was a Netflix show, Jeff. Obviously, this is where I feel like it got the most attention, I would say. I did not actually hear about it when it was not on Netflix. But it was originally a show on A&E. And I don't know if the property got purchased, if it got canceled and then re-picked up. But if it did, I would love to know what TV show that got canceled would you want picked up by another network?
Max, I'm curious from your perspective. What's a TV show that you thought lived too short of a life?
Detroiters.
That's a great answer.
Obviously, this is a show that's kind of having a little bit of a renaissance on social media. It feels like a lot of people are finding it after its second season cancellation from Comedy Central. But even beyond that, I feel like a lot of these shows of its time that were Comedy Central series that didn't make it as they were ransacking original content found homes at other places. If you haven't seen Southside on HBO Max, that's a hilarious show that unfortunately got canceled. The other two went on to have so much success also at HBO Max. It was a primetime Emmy nominee for writing in a comedy series this year, a thing that I don't think it ever would have gotten at Comedy Central. And I just want to see what Detroiters could have done, what Sam Richardson and Tim Robinson could have made. And yeah, it deserves 3, 4, 5. All right. HBO, if the Detroit Lions win the Super Bowl, you have to pick up Detroiters and make a third season.
Those are just the rules.
Zaslav, call me.
Not to throw us too off the rails, but I did see this great graphic about things that didn't exist when the last time the Detroit Lions made the championship. And one of them was just texting, and I was like, oh, that hurts a little bit.
Honestly, Jeff, you could have named states and I would have believed you.
Florida just wasn't a thing then. There were no Florida men. Rich, I'm curious from your perspective, what's a show that...
You don't ask a John from Cincinnati, man, what show got canceled too early.
No, we gave him a loophole to bring up this goddamn show again.
HBO, if you're listening, if the Bengals win the Stanley Cup, oh my God, if they win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, no. If the Bengals win the Stanley Cup, Rich gets Cincinnati. One more season of John from Cincinnati.
Yeah, one of those things is a better odds of happening. It's not Jay from C getting renewed.
Oh my God. Yeah, no. If the Cincinnati Cyclones win the Stanley Cup,
Whatever cup it is.
If you have not been to beer night at the Cincinnati Cyclones, I implore
every
you
night's
to
beer
do
night
it.
at the Cyclones.
It's great. Well, I went in a little bit of a different direction than the two of you. There's two shows one that actually got canceled after a single season that I absolutely adore. And there was a small push for it to be on Netflix, but it just wasn't successful. And that's called Forever. It is that crime of the week sort of thing, but like fantasy. It was fairly beloved on, I believe it was on Fox. And then CW actually picked it up to show reruns of 10 episodes of a show. So like you go through it pretty quick. The other one is the show that's called Alphas, that was on the Sci-Fi Network. That it had 2 seasons. It was what would actually happen if like mutants existed, if like we started to see the mutations in human beings, and what life would be like. The problem was, for a show that wanted to do so much, it had such a little budget, which is sort of that sci-fi special. And it didn't get what it deserved. So maybe we'll do those shows in the future. Maybe we're
going to do them all.
Yeah,
we're
exactly.
going to do every show that's ever existed.
Yeah, that's the goal, Rich.
Stay tuned.
It's either that or, if we have children, they take over the podcast and do it.
Wow.
But thank you, Rich, for that question of the week.
I will leave it inheritance after all.
Yeah, generational wealth in the form of a podcast is that's our form of inheritance. Well, boys, let's talk a little bit more about you, and let's start off with a quick synopsis. A dangerously charming, intensely obsessive young man goes to extreme measures to insert himself into the lives of those he is transfixed by.
He's burying the lead there. That's
I mean, yes and no. But I think it does a pretty decent job of talking about some of what we watched for this episode. Max, do you mind telling us how You was made?
Today we are talking about the pilot episode of You, which originally aired on September 9th, 2018 on Lifetime Network. That's our second Lifetime show we've done here on TVPL. Go check out our coverage of Unreal for more. We're going to be talking about a duo, Greg Berlanti and Sara Gamble. Also, just a little bonus tidbit for today that the pilot episode was directed by Lee Toland Krieger, who also recently did our Riverdale pilot. So go check that episode out with special guest pilot John Marco Ceresi. So You is based on the novel of the same name by Caroline Kepnes, originally published in 2014. The book has gone to spawn 3 sequels in its series titled Hidden Bodies, You Love Me, and For You and Only You. Less than 6 months after the book's release, the rights were acquired by noted producer, screenwriter, director Greg Berlanti and Sara Gamble. Berlanti got a start as a staff writer on Dawson's Creek, and after the departure of creator Kevin Williamson, a then 28-year-old Berlanti took over as showrunner. He's since gone on to serve as an executive producer on 42 different TV shows, and as a writer and director on multiple feature films. Gamble is best known as a winner of HBO's Project Greenlight Season 2, as well as a staff writer on Supernatural and showrunner on Sci-Fi's The Magicians.
Whoa.
We have to do The Magicians sometime. Sorry, one of my favorite shows.
Didn't think we were going to talk about that many sci-fi originals in the first few minutes of today's podcast.
Hell yeah.
No, we're talking about
Max?
So the duo Berlanti and Gamble originally pitches You to Showtime and Netflix, receiving rejections, and it takes 2 full years before the series is picked up by Lifetime with a 10-episode straight-to-series order, with production taking place entirely in New York City on location, and actually renewed by Lifetime for Season 2 before the pilot even aired, a deal that would be rescinded 3 weeks after the Season 1 finale.
Oops.
The show, as we've all mentioned, has gone to find a second home at Netflix despite the original passing by the channel and has found success there. But let's figure out this Lifetime version. Let's see what that cable package had going on.
So let's dive in. And Max, thanks for that little bit of a background. And I think that this pilot does something so interesting, which is it takes the concept of a meet cute, which, we've all been, we've all learned to see a meet cute and be like, oh, they're going to end up together. Like, how's it going to happen? But it turns it into this sick, twisted version of it. And like in a sadistic, like, oh, what if the meet cute really isn't a meet cute and circumstance isn't really circumstance? It's twisted and created by one mentally ill, in this instance, individual. I'm curious, what did you guys think of our opening in this bookstore that seemed so pleasant and nice, but then turned into, this pilot?
Well, I think stylistically, the idea of having the main character narrate basically everything from his internal dialogue it's a good choice. I like it a lot. You immediately hate this guy. There's nothing there is nothing that comes out of this dude's internal dialogue that turns into something kind of redeeming or human or anything like that. This person is someone who is, I wrote down in all caps, this is if Holden Caulfield was a serial killer in 2018.
Oh my god.
Well, if Salinger would write another fucking book.
Yeah. What a fucking bum.
He's too busy doing Hollywood stars and celebrities. What do they know? Do they know things? Let's find out.
I'm curious for the two of you because, yeah, it's an interesting show in the idea that this is one of our first, other than really Desperate Housewives, where we have a consistent narrator throughout the entirety of the show.
Yeah.
But additionally to that, we have this little twist in that it's an unreliable narrator as well. Their perspective of the way things are working and going around them is slightly skewed, and you can't just slightly. And there's clues throughout this pilot of the idea of how they view the world and how it's different. And yes, it's very obvious that things that they're doing are not right. But there are also, if you want to fall in love with the concept of romanticism of this man being completely obsessed with this woman from the start, you might, shove some things aside. I'm curious, Max, what you're thinking.
I think something that is so clear with, and we should say, Joe Goldberg's narration and perspective is that it does such a good job of setting exactly what the tone of the show is going to be, the worldview of the show is going to be. And despite being unreliable, we get dream sequences in Joe's narration and things of that sort. It's so clear what he believes. They make it so well known. And I at least appreciate that this show has a POV and it has perspective, and it really does all of these things to serve that POV. I think this is a really tonally set up show. And I have to keep reminding myself that this is not anti-hero TV. This is straight villain shit.
Yes,
and I think Penn Badgley even come out and said, he's like, no, like, do not baby girl Joe Goldberg. Like, this is not a good person, because he's really fucking charismatic. And when we actually see him interacting in the world, you see this person who is super driven, super detail oriented, has such an incredible attention to detail. Some of the flirtations between Joe and Beck, like we talk about, scenes where like, I'm not buying the flirtations here. You're watching it and you're like, oh, this is Stevie. Like, this is really good on-screen chemistry. And I have to remind myself, this is a monster. This is an absolute monster of a human being in a logoless hat. That psychopath.
I guess that's supposed to be the point, right? Like, and also, like, amazing. Let's just talk about the importance of the representation of crazy Jews out there.
Well, Max, I think it's super interesting you bring up, like, that Penn Badgley was so outspoken of, like, this guy is not a hero. You should not be putting him on a pedestal, because he actually had to be convinced to take this role. Initially, when he was offered it, he was super hesitant, supposedly, to the point where Berlanti and Gamble had to go to his house and be like, let's just put it on the table. He's not a good guy. And, like, we're not going to glorify what he does. And, like, Badgley had to be genuinely, like, sold on, this isn't the worst idea. in the world. To, like,
what is he
this.
coming from? What is Penn Badgley coming
Gossip
from
Girl.
this?
Yeah, Gossip Girl, where, you know, I don't want to spoil the show, but
probably
you
still
know.
a villain. Yeah, he's probably still a villain, but also like it's hard to go from heartthrob to like, oh, this is going to really affect how people think about me, because the way he is, he dominates like 90% of the dialogue in the show. This is his show. This is just him. This is his crazy ass brain. And I really, I could see why he'd have trepidation about this, because you don't want to get typecast as someone who's going to be a villain. And it doesn't help that he kind of looks a little bit like what's his face, the serial killer, Ted Bundy.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit of a Ted Bundy thing going on. And Rich, to your point of Badgley dominating like 90% of this, yeah, that's trepidatious. This show is a tightrope walk by how well Penn Badgley can command that screen. And I do feel like I hesitate to call him protagonist, but like as a lead of a series, he does a really good job, at least in my opinion, of having that magnetism, keeping you on him, like controlling the screen. I think he has a phenomenal screen presence in this. I wasn't super familiar. He's a guy that I know more than I actually know of, but I mean, I definitely want to watch him, like for better or worse, in this series.
He's in the greater CW heartthrob universe.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. So I have a genuine question for the two of you. So we get this meet cute-esque scene. Did you two feel worried about the privacy of your data, information, and location after watching Joe somehow, off of a single name on a credit card, be able to figure out everything he needs to know about Beck, including where she lives, her life, her social media, how she's doing in school, like all this shit?
I don't know, man.
Think about it.
I've got more cookies than Oreo at this point. Like I don't care.
Great internet joke by Matt. Super topical.
My data's everywhere at this point. I've just accepted it. I was more concerned about learning that Beck's IG is Bechdel test.
Yeah, that was very funny.
Oh, God. And she loves the puns, because we learn about that email later in the episode, which, if for someone to have the gall to say, yeah, the easiest way to reach me is by email, is just, that's insane to me. My inbox has at least a single comma before the number of run.
Are you implying that you don't think having a professional email of Beck in real life at gmail.com is something that an adult should do?
Which is, of course, a reference to the movie Dan in Real Life.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely.
It just feels like when you make like an adult email address, like when you're a kid, and it's just like, all right, this is how you're going to find me for the rest of my life. Like, I've signed up for too many things. I've got this attached too much. This is just how you reach me.
So as we go through this, like this pursuit and this learning of Beck from the perspective of Joe, and just seeing, because at the beginning, this pursuit almost seems slightly relatable in the sense of, oh, something as like meaningless as I found them on Instagram, or I found their Twitter, like, oh, I know this person's name. As soon as it starts to evolve into, oh, well, I figured out what their brother and sister's names are. And I figured out that their dad's out of the picture because he stopped showing up in photos when she was 12. And then this is her fucking address. That's the moment where I think us as an audience are realizing, oh, we're the baddies. We are the baddies in
Jeff,
this episode.
Not us, not we, but you.
Yeah, you specifically.
Something that is so eerie about you, the series, is how like gradual it makes these progressions, that like you don't even really notice how quickly things escalate. And that's the thing too. And that's why I love the pacing of the Joe Goldberg narration in this pilot, because it's so casual. It's 1 minute you're finding an Instagram and you're finding a couple of photos of someone, and then it becomes like personal data really quick. And because of the way that Joe vocalizes it, you don't even really notice this transition happening. And this happens a few times too, where it's like it gets worse and worse over time, but it's like it starts at a point and then it very quickly levels up and you barely even notice because of how just in it he is.
Yeah. I mean, also another thing too is that it is the protagonist, competence thing that we keep going back. Like we saw it in Suits, we saw it in a number of shows that we've done pretty recently. He is, I mean, the dude's good at stalking. I'm sorry.
Well, I've always said we need to see the protagonists be good at their job.
Yeah, and
exactly.
This is his superpower. We've talked about wearing the blank logo hat. Shows that you have superpowers. His is he can find out everything about you in about 20 minutes.
He's also a damn good bookstore manager. Let's give him credit there too. Yeah. Joe manages the hell out of that independent bookstore.
And a really good mentor to that small child.
Well,
he's good at so many things.
Let's talk about a guy who doesn't seem to be good at anything that we meet throughout this process of learning about Beck.
Oh, don't talk about Paco that way.
No. And that is Benji, Beck's boyfriend. I think this pilot did such a good job of, we have Joe, who's obviously the villain of our pilot, but somehow you hate Benji even fucking more than you think Joe is the worst.
That Berlanti and Gamble make the literal like stalker and violent criminal
a hero,
the seventh most offensive character in this episode.
I know all of Beck's friends are awful. All the people that are just around Joe are terrible. Like even Zach Cherry is kind of an asshole. Like I love that guy.
Well, we do have TVPL alum from our Pretty Little Liars episode of Shay Mitchell as one of Beck's friends. Great to see her.
I believe her name is Peach, which also fucking
Peach.
sucks.
Well, Rich, in how everything is connecting, what do you think Peach's last name is? You actually mentioned it earlier.
I did?
Yeah.
It's not. Is it you?
No, it's Peach Salinger, a.k.a.
Oh, yes.
A.k.a.
That just seems too easy.
She's living off of that Catcher in the Rye money. Like that's 100% what's happening.
To say, just really quick, while we're on Beck's friends, before we get back to shithead Benji, they're at that dinner. There's a dinner party that Beck goes to for someone's birthday, and they're just casually dropping that one of the girls did anal for the first time, and it's like, listen,
yes,
Joe's job is being made really easy for him because people are just shouting about anal sex in the middle of a restaurant.
That's right. Even if you don't Facebook it, we found it out.
Eventually when you are at a meal with friends, you run out of things to talk about, and you just, you got to go into that. I'm so excited to see you two this weekend. Wait till you hear what I have to say.
Oh, no.
But let's talk a little bit about Benji, because we talk about building up a villain, and I think the show does an excellent job going from everything from one of the worst photoshopped photos I've ever seen in my life of the actor's face on the model's body to say that Benji at one point was a model, to instantly, I did not know I hated artisanal soda makers so much, but when they were like, oh, he makes artisanal sodas, I was like,
one of the flavors is cumin.
Yeah, one of the well,
I want that person to die.
The line that got me was, there were two lines that Benji got me, that Benji said that I lost my fucking mind, because I was like, great dialogue, because we all hate this man now. One was, you love Indian food, so we have a cumin flavor, which is insane.
Hard pass.
The other one was, so Beck and Benji are in a fight because Benji got a blowjob from a girl at a party that wasn't Beck. Do either of you two have the line written down that you think I'm about to say?
Oh, is it his defense for the blowjob being, she told me she had good coke?
Also, he's an artisanal soda maker. He should aim higher.
He also said, I was wasted. I didn't even finish, which is
Nailed
nuts.
It.
That is
Dude really stuck the landing on that one.
That is insane behavior. And then
we got Joe Goldberg look like motherfucking Teresa over here.
But one of the things that I think this scene does such a good job of doing is, like, as of right now, from Joe's perspective, we've sort of put Beck on this pedestal of like, oh, well, she has corrupt people around her. She has corrupt people around her. And then we see Beck's shitty decision-making by sleeping with Benji, even though he's professed to cheating. He said it was a mistake. But then he starts kissing her neck and all seems to be forgiven. Let's have a quick,
hey, look, that's a Del Taco hookup. That is, that's like, I don't want it, but it's 2 a.m. and there's nothing else open.
For those in the Midwest who don't have a Del Taco, Rich is referring to like Culver's equivalent. Okay. Yeah. Max, what are you thinking?
Yeah, does no one have money to buy blinds in New York City? Yeah, you know the thing of like every movie that could be solved if they had cell phones. Well, half of this episode wouldn't happen if Beck could buy blinds.
Hey man, all of Seinfeld couldn't happen with cell phones. So
I do have this quote.
Suspense of disbelief.
Could I be considered a artisanal soda maker since I have a soda stream? I would like to know if that is the correct.
Leave your answer in the comments.
Yes, please.
Just put different spices in there and see what happens.
That's how it works. So, I mean, as we continue, we've met this Benji character. We start to get a little bit of a perspective of Beck's life Joe's life outside of just, stalking Beck for, that there's no better word. He is stalking
if he's not stalking, he's stalking.
Wow.
So we get to learn a little bit about the child that is his neighbor named Paco, who seems like, just a innocent bystander in this situation. This is the first instance, though, that we see that Joe might be okay, or there's some salvageable parts of him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's in this small instance of like, hey, he goes hungry for the evening to ensure that this child, who is a victim of his circumstances, he's done nothing wrong, has a hot meal that night. And then he proceeds to take that all away by continuing to stalk the shit out of Beck in that scenario.
Yeah, I think that is like basically how serial killers just keep getting away with it anyways, right? And it's basically
endless supply
just
of
like
meatball subs.
That's what I was referring to. No, I mean it's like
John Wayne Gacy was great at birthday parties.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I mean you do have like a part of your brain that is like completely normal, like social function, but then also you're gonna take a lot of your conflict to the extreme. And I mean, I think they make a lot of attempts to try to humanize his behavior, and it is difficult. That's a difficult run.
What I find interesting about the like Joe Paco plot is they kind of allude to Joe having been mentored and taken in when he was young by the elderly owner of the bookstore. And I am curious if they're setting up that perhaps Joe had some childhood issues as well, and like parents who weren't around, and therefore, he found salvation and comfort in the bookstore. And so now he's kind of passing that along to this boy Paco, where he's like exposing him to literature and, getting him hot meatball subs and, even lying to him and saying, oh, don't worry, I've got Thai food leftovers. And instead he makes like a peanut butter sandwich. So I do wonder if we're getting a little bit of foreshadowing to Joe's past with that parallel.
Yeah, and I think that the Paco relationship is used as such an interesting tool in this pilot, because not only does it give us a reprieve from just, watching a man stalk a woman and the occasional Beck scene where we see just life from her perspective, supposedly, but we also get one of the greatest scenes that I was not expecting in this show, when Paco finishes reading The Three Musketeers. And if this is not the villain origin story of this pilot, I do not know what is, because I just have written down in my notes, this is the cage. And I I lost my mind of like, it reminds me, I don't know if you two saw Suicide Squad, but it's like that scene where the guy's like, this is Katana. She has my back. She has a sword that can.
Are you talking about the Suicide Squad, the James Gunn second version, or the original one where Will Smith's like, we must be some kind of Suicide Squad?
The one that was written like that, the first one. But like, they use Paco almost as this device of showing us everything that we should be anticipating to be used, right? At first, we have the cage. We understand, hey, it's an oxygenated room that stays at 65 degrees, and here are all these. And we start to see, Max, as you were alluding to, some of the background of, hey, Joe was taken in by this man who drilled into his head every single detail of this rule.
Am I dumb in wondering how this independent bookstore in 2018 has this Terry Benedict's casino level of security system in its basement?
You're definitely not alone in that. I was wondering why the hell that this tiny bookstore had that. There's almost no reason unless they only like, if you work specifically in first editions, then sure, if you're like working on like rehabilitating old books and old first editions and stuff, but like there's literally no reason. I mean, email us if we're wrong or DM us or whatever. But how could you possibly have that as a small independent bookstore?
Just to give the audience an idea, in 2022 there was a first edition of Don Quixote that was found, and it was considered a miracle because of just how old the book was.
Or Don Quixote, if you've been watching The Pilot of You.
And I do want to get to the Don Quixote bit because I found it is such a nice little clue about Joe. But that book itself went for $1.65 million at auction because of how rare it is. If you found a first edition, this is something that I'm super interested in but can't afford. So is life. But if you wanted to get a first edition of Alice in Wonderland, we're talking about a $30,000 to $40,000 purchase. So if you're selling those books and you're able to procure them, sure, you can afford these oxygen tanks. I just don't know, with my knowledge, how likely it is that people are restoring first edition books in, your local bookstore.
Jeff, just a question for you here. When you refer to that novel as being foreshadowing for something later, are you referring to the scene when Don Quixote masturbates in the bushes?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, no, that a lot of people love the windmill scene in Don
fighting
Quixote.
The windmill.
Yeah, of him fighting his windmill. But I truly am a big fan of when Don Quixote, self-gratifies. No, in all honesty, I think that it was such a great line of saying Don Quixote wanted to be chivalrous. And that was Joe's misinterpretation of the book. It's a man who goes insane. Mm-hmm. And his journeys while followed by his own, assistant, in this instance, Paco, who's trying to help him do his best and is unknowing in these conquests. But that is just another interesting, I genuinely was like, okay, really cool. Great clue of like, this guy's fucking nuts and he's misinterpreting. He thinks of himself as this literary genius when really he doesn't even understand the basic concepts of some of the classic literature that's around.
I liked the part with the meatball sub.
So let's move forward a little bit and talk about the development of the relationship between Beck and Joe, because Joe breaks into Beck's apartment and we have that. Did either of you expect Joe to be caught by Beck in this scene?
Well, I think we're skipping over it. It's not just that he breaks in. Joe Goldberg phones in a fake gas leak to get the gas company to go to her apartment because he knows her schedule and knows when she won't be home, lets himself in while they're doing maintenance, says he's her boyfriend and that he's going to tidy up and lock up.
I really
And
hope this is not a real loophole to getting into someone's apartment, because that is fucking horrifying.
Yeah, no, it is, and it's absolutely horrifying, and it's like the confidence, the ease at which he does it, and even before we start thinking about getting caught, him showing himself around. I don't know if you noticed this. Joe steals a pair of underwear while he's going through the apartment. Really bothersome. Do not like that at all. But yeah, it ends up with him in her bathroom, hearing her come home, and Joe hiding in the shower as Beck is 2 feet away. When she turns the water onto the shower, I gasped. I was on high alert. I was like, I did not know how this was going to go. It was one of the most like attention driven, like fully captivated moments I've had, honestly, watching a pilot done the show in some time.
So Max, you bring up a good point. This is definitely one of those heart pounding scenes. I'm curious, was your heart pounding even harder when you saw that Beck decided to go and do an open mic in Greenpoint?
Oh, dog.
After taking a few too many pickleback shots in a venue that definitely was not the right venue for her poetry.
The nicest open mic venue in New York, by hands down. That is a beautiful bar. No one is doing that. Also, what are the rules of this open mic? Because everyone can just talk. That is like, if you've been to an open mic in New York, it's sad. It's like, let it be sad. It's supposed to be sad. It shouldn't be like when I did my very first one, someone went before me and also did poetry, but they did it to 5 people in a dark room, and it was sad.
And we all agreed. We were all sad.
And it sucked, and we were all supportive.
That's just far too nice of a venue for any sort of poetry or spoken word open mic night.
I'm saying.
I don't think they still do it anymore, but out here in LA, there used to be this really fun mic in the banquet room of a Salvadoran restaurant on Beverly Boulevard.
Hell yeah. Sign me up.
I used to love playing that show.
But this is an important scene because we continue to see that Beck's friends aren't that great. The poem itself is a little bit of a clue into Beck's state of looking for love, wanting love, but not really having a true companion out there. And then we see Beck do the dumbest shit that you could ever do in New York, which is drunkenly go by yourself down into the subway and cross the line. You don't cross over the line. It's the first thing you teach anyone when you go to New York. And Beck, I pardon my language, you were being a dumb bitch and you crossed the line.
Also, I think what the scene proved is how right Joe was about everything, though. And that was actually kind of the sadder part, because like, yeah, she's getting like visibly less satisfied with her life. And to be honest, it looked like that fall could have been not accidental at that point.
100%.
Yeah, she was in a very, very bad way, and honestly, we wouldn't have known that without Joe. And for also being an unreliable narrator, and the fact that he's spinning everything to what he wants, he is really diving into her psyche, which also freaks me the hell out. And makes him like even scarier of a character.
For all the jokes that we made about how this is far too nice of a venue for them to do an open mic night, it's a really upsetting scene to watch, because you do these cuts to Beck's entire table of friends kind of shit-talking her and mocking her behind her back when she's grabbing drinks or getting ready to go on. Like, they're not supportive. They're shit-talking the venue, why they're there, why they had to go to Greenpoint, which, like, it's Brooklyn in 2018. Like, you're going out there. It's fine. The heckling from the audience, the real sexist comments from that guy in the back telling her just to like be happier, and why is
smile
she, or to smile, and like, why is she so sad? And I don't know. It's just like Joe is again the like 8th worst person in this pilot. I don't know how else to put it. It's like, I know I'm not supposed to root for him, but if he could just be fucking normal for 5 minutes.
He's about to jump the rankings from 8 to 1, buddy.
Yeah. So Joe comes in and saves the day, right? And another like just anxiety inducing scene of seeing Beck fall on these tracks, not really seeking the immediate help. Because Rich, you mentioned it, there's a possibility that there was intent in falling, and then we get the great, Beck throws up on Joe, and that cuts the tension like a knife.
That ruled.
And it was amazing. I was not expecting it, and I was just like, awesome, good.
I
great.
have to give a little bit of credit here to Lee Toland Krieger with just the pacing in so many sections of this episode, because there's like 2 back-to-back here in this area we're talking about that are so different in the way they build, but I think are both so effective. The first is Beck being drunk in the subway. She's teetering towards the rail. We have this gentleman who is like begging for money, and he's talking to himself, and I don't know if he's actually getting more and more aggressive with how he does this Engine number 9 poem, but we're hearing it from Joe's perspective as getting more frantic and more aggressive and faster paced and angrier. And you're building to this headway of Beck falling onto the tracks and seeing the lights of the train. And like that's just insane with how dramatic and how tense and how heart pumping it is. And then we linger just enough on Beck falling on top of Joe when he saves her, and they look into each other's eyes before she yaks, that it's so sweet for a moment before it comes crashing back down to earth. And it's those types of things. It's how long a gaze lasts. It's how aggressive we build a chant that can make or break a show like this, where the plot is entirely unlikable. And I just think that Krieger does like a really, really good job of making these moments feel like TV.
It is, yeah, it is a for a TV. There are multiple times that I was watching this, and it's such a great point that they are. It feels like it is a movie that they like really outkicked like what their expectations were of a TV show, and like you said, in those couple moments, there are things that felt like Mission Impossible, things that felt like Ocean's 11. All in just like a regular like cable TV show. You would not expect that type of like expert camera work, and I hope they stay with that. I hope other episodes are like that.
Yeah, like we'll talk about this in Things We Love. The way this pilot was shot was so impressive for what it was, right? Like there was I think there was an anamorphic lens that was used. I know that's a super fancy term for people who don't know cinematography, but I don't give a shit because I was genuinely so impressed.
Gonna dub that down for everyone at home. Shooting wide angle lens on standard 35 millimeter stock. The idea being that you stretch out and make an image look distorted so that it looks abnormal.
Yeah,
and yeah, they do that with a few shots.
It's how they make Tom Cruise look tall.
Yeah, exactly. There you go, Rich.
It's really not. Don't take that home with you.
Yeah, Tom, thanks for listening to the show. We love you.
That's a actual like a really cool trick of movie making called a crate.
So after this sequence of events, right? Joe takes Beck home. We get to see Benji again. There's a great line where Joe calls Benji a waste of hair, which is a new insult that I'm going to keep for myself one day.
Yeah.
We can't all have Penn Badgley's hair.
Yeah. We get this.
I can. I know where he lives now.
We get this book repair scene where there's the increasing thought of these are tools of the trade for Joe. These are things that he is so comfortable with, and the excruciating detail with which he explains these to a child makes it's Schrodinger's cat in this instance. You have to you're showing me a mallet. You better fucking use that mallet again, or I'm gonna be upset. And then we get the luring of Benji, the problem, the hiccup in Joe's plan of ending up with Beck. And this was just another scene that was just so well written of, we know that something nefarious is happening to Benji, yet I'm rooting for it to all happen in front of me, and I'm questioning my morality at the same
you're
point.
rooting for it to happen because we see Benji be a bad friend and a bad business partner when he gets this fake meetup from Joe posing as, I believe it's a culture writer at New York Magazine
Yeah.
is his cover in this, and Benji basically cuts out his business partner. Is like, no, like they need one face for it to look good, and I'm going to be the face. And he basically like
Joe has the entire moment of this riding on that.
Yeah,
if that's what
has
you're
the
going
entire
towards.
moment riding on that, and also betting on the fact that Benji won't remember the face of someone that he just saw right up front, maybe an evening ago.
Yep.
Yeah, and the additional thing of this was just so well written. Of Joe says, "Hey, we're gonna meet up at this like speakeasy of sorts. Hey, you've been here. Have you been here before?" And Benji saying, "Yeah,
Oh
I've
man,
been here."
I
Beautiful.
laughed so hard at Benji's bullshit there of trying to act so cool, like he's been a couple times to this hot after hour spot,
which is an alley.
Yeah, and then our pilot comes to an end with two very different scenes, right? One being that Joe asked Beck out, and Beck has said yes, even though it's by email. So, I take that with a grain of salt. But then we also see that Benji is now in the cage, and seems to be Joe's hostage, or at least alive, thankfully, for now. And that's our pilot. I'm genuinely curious. Were there things that you loved about this pilot that maybe we didn't discuss in this episode?
Yeah, I mean, a couple things for me. We very very briefly mentioned his name, but shout out to the Zach Cherry sighting of playing Joe's coworker in this. I'm so glad he's like really gotten somebody to sink his teeth into with Severance, but he's just great in every cameo he pops up in. He's one of my favorite one-offs in Secession's run. My real thing I need to highlight though is sometimes you realize you're more like a character than you think, and there's some Beckisms in this episode where I'm just like, all right, yeah, Beck's got Beck's got it right. So two Beck quotes I need to give here right now. To
Is
everyone
one
out,
the mac and cheese?
to everyone out there
to
chasing
God.
their dreams, don't give up. And in the meantime, mac and cheese.
God damn it, Max.
Yeah,
I love that one
she's
so
real
much.
bad at Twitter.
And then, yeah, it was 2018. We were not tweeting. That's like a 2011 type tweet right there.
we were definitely tweeting in 2018.
No, we were definitely tweeting. I'm saying we were not tweeting that kind of just like innocent, lovey-dovey stuff.
It's some Travis Kelce level tweeting.
The Beck quote that I can only just I can't stress how much I relate to this is, I do think I'd be happier if I was stupider.
Yeah, that is what a weird roundabout way to say a very famous quote of ignorance is bliss. But
yeah, so Rich, any things that you loved about this pilot?
All I wrote down, and I do like this pilot. I'm not going to say that like we touched on almost everything that I love, but the one thing that I wrote down was, bro, you waste of hair. That was that just expert level insult, like you said. But yeah, other than that, everything else we covered.
And for myself, I agree. We've talked a lot about this pilot. There is one moment that could have been a wait a minute moment if it wasn't done so wonderfully, which is, we talked a little bit about how Joe was pleasuring himself outside of Beck's window, but to smoothly turn that into him holding the door for the old lady and hailing a cab was just magnificent. I want to be in the writer's room when they wrote that scene, and I want to shake everyone's hand.
Well, not Joe's. Not Joe's. Not Joe's.
No. Joe should have sanitized his fucking hand before he touched that old woman's bag, because that's gross. But yeah, that was, holy shit, that was an amazing scene.
I think that's actually his. If I think about it now in hindsight, I think that's probably his first indicator that he was a serial killer, because that is like the sexual gratification of killing and like violence and stuff like that is like almost unanimous with all of the serial killers, and I completely didn't think about that until now.
But on a TV level, though, it's just another one of those like fantastic timing sequences and the camera placement and the way that we just seamlessly go from this really dark moment to this comedic beat.
Yeah.
And, like it's so well done in that regard.
So wait a minute moments. I'm going to kick us off because there was, I was genuinely shocked. I know it's Lifetime. Lifetime's a little bit sexier than the other cable networks, sure. But I was genuinely shocked with how much they got away with as far as like near nudity on this pilot. I did not need to see Benji's ass. I never needed to see it. I thought that the photoshopped photo of him as a model was enough for me, but I almost saw a full asshole, and I did not need to see that in this pilot. What about you two?
I mean, just Joe Goldberg, just as a person.
Oh, I thought you were going to say as a name, and I was like, damn, Max, that's... we could have gotten something a little bit more creative. Rich, what about you?
Why was this episode dedicated to someone?
Yes, thank you. Oh my God, that's a wild thing to do. Why
was this? Yeah, we just watched someone brutally hit someone over the face with a hammer, and then almost immediately following, dedicated to some friend, I guess.
Yeah,
but usually that is someone passed away, and it's like an in memoriam. It's like dedicated to the life of Benji. Someone who was he's not dead. He's in the cage. It's 65 degrees. The humidity's perfect. He'll be fine. He's got things to do. He's got books to read. But yeah, it's like, imagine you're the family member of this person who I'm assuming passed away, and everyone at the network's like, listen, we made sure to pay tribute. It's in the end credits, and they're watching this pilot for the first time, and it's been 45 minutes of this man stalking and masturbating and like violently attacking people, and then it's like your deceased loved one's name popping up right
in the loving memory of Nick, and it's just like, that's insane.
Don't do it.
You could have done so many other things.
Good God.
So we do have an in-flight question. Our in-flight question was brought to you by someone in Max's home named MK, who asked, would you rather do an open mic or get thrown up on? And Rich, I'm going to ask you.
Also, don't just describe someone as in someone's home after watching this.
No. It's in theme of the episode.
I'm going open mic for sure, considering I've done several of them. I would
well,
like
hold
to
on.
not
The
get
question
puked on.
The question is not would you rather do an open mic. It's would you rather bomb an open mic or have someone throw up on your face was the
There's
DM
no difference.
question.
There's no difference. No one has ever done good at an open mic.
I am assuming we bomb, so I made some editorial choices. Max, what about you?
Yeah, having had one of these things happen to me in my life before, I'm taking the puke in the face every single time. I cannot stress enough. It is part of art. You are going to bomb. It is the worst feeling in the world. It can eat at you. It makes you feel like you ate shit. And puke easily gets wiped off. You can cleanse yourself of the puke so much quicker than you can cleanse yourself of bombing that bad.
It's fine.
And having had both of these things happen to me in my life, I will say the puke is usually the better choice, because that person normally can apologize to you for puking on you at some point. A nasty audience who doesn't get what you're doing or isn't forgiving normally does not forgive you for your bad performance. Well, thanks for that in-flight question. We had a ton of them actually submitted to this episode.
Yeah, thank you guys.
So thank you guys. Keep on submitting them. We'll make sure to put up posts, and we'll tell you more about how to submit those later. Max, did you have something?
Yeah, I was going to just say, I mean, this, beyond the questions, this whole episode was because someone in a recent Reddit post on our Brooklyn Nine-Nine episode said, do you? And we took it literally.
And then we did the show.
But yeah, thank you to everyone who responded and liked and commented, upvoted on our Brooklyn Nine-Nine episode on Reddit. The generosity was so warm there. And yeah, like if you have shows you want to see us talk about in the new year, just, I don't know, ask us.
Yeah.
We usually need ideas, so tell us what you want to see.
We got
do
a
it.
big old spreadsheet, and we don't care about that if you have a better idea.
And if you're the Redditor who said you guys should do you, I hope you're enjoying today's episode.
Yeah. I better believe I'm DMing it to you.
Well, boys, let's talk a little bit about the history of this show. So as we discussed, there are 4 seasons currently of the show. It is still in production as of today.
Going into its final season.
Yeah, the first season was on Lifetime, but after cancellation of the show, it was then picked up by Netflix, and that is where you can find the 40 current episodes of this show if you choose to watch it based off of maybe listening to this, or maybe you're on the fence. As far as reception for the show, I only had access to the first season because Netflix likes to talk about made-up statistics with their shows, so why not talk about Lifetime? As far as a cable show goes, it did fine. It got about 820,000 viewers on the series premiere, and it kept around 66% of those by the finale, which not that bad considering the type of show this is, the network that it was on, and the content of it. It is a fairly well-reviewed show. When I mean that, like, Metacritic, Rotten Tomatoes, critics themselves, there was a pretty glowing piece in the New York Times that I read that I was just like, cool. So yeah, like, and you listen to us, I think we all pretty much liked it. Let's talk about awards, because when it comes to this show, just like Joe, it gets a lot of attention, but not a lot of finishing, because there were 8 nominations for this show and 0 wins for it.
Didn't even get Stalker of the Year.
I know. I'm so disappointed. But that is the current history of the show. As Max said, there's one more season set to come. But yeah, Rich, it's now time for your game of the week.
Dun, 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 dun. We're doing Rich's game of the week, and obviously our protagonist is named Penn Badgley, and I wanted to give you some trivia about some other famous pens. So Jeff,
oh my God.
Jeff, this first one is for you. Penn Station opened in 1910 to take commuters all around the Northeast and all the way to Chicago. Its daily commuter rate is currently 3 times what it was built for, so that's not good. Penn Station services all of the following railways except what? Long Island Railway, Path New Jersey Transit, Metro North Railroad, New York City MTA, or Amtrak.
I'm going to say not Amtrak. I'm going to say that.
Oh, it is Metro North.
That goes into Grand Central, because that's how I got from the suburbs of Connecticut into New York City to cause trouble as a teen.
Yeah. Grand Central currently services 750,000 people a day. It's actually built for that. All right, Max, the next one is for you. University of Pennsylvania's tradition of toasting each home football game, where students throw thousands of slices of bread on the field. Originally, that's a real thing. Originally came about because of Prohibition. The original toast of the University of Pennsylvania is A, the old fashioned, B, the martini, C, the whiskey sour, D, the highball.
Oh God, fucking Ivy League kids. I'm gonna say C, the whiskey sour.
It is the highball, and they actually have a song that they sing about highballs. Tear it down.
Not high as balls, but high balls. Just clarification.
Just bad private school. Just bad private schools.
We went to state school. We're fine.
And one more for you. You guys can do both. You guys can both jump in on this one. I feel like the first one I knew Max would get. The second one I figured Jeff would get. He seems like that. Yeah. Did you know that it was the highball?
Yeah, I did know it's the highball.
God damn it, you were so weird. All right, last one. The magician and entertainer Penn Jillette of the famous duo Penn and Teller has been in the entertainment industry since the early 70s. In addition to a Broadway magic act, then becoming staples of the Vegas magic scene, Penn was also at one point the voice of what? A, Comedy Central, B, Pepsi TV ads, C, New York One, D, TiVo ads?
I feel like TiVo, like, right? Like, why not? Let's say TiVo.
I'm gonna go with I'm gonna go New York One.
It is Comedy Central. In the 90s, he was the main voiceover guy for all of the promos for Comedy Central.
Good for him.
He would do the whole like what's up next kind of thing.
I will also say, Rich, I was genuinely curious. He has a very extensive voice acting career. Rich, I will just say, genuinely disappointed you didn't make Max and I do a spelling bee using the letter U. Now, as our flight comes to a land, I have two questions for you, gentlemen. And one, based off of the pilot, would you continue watching this show? And two, we're getting a 5th season of You. Do we think that this show belongs on TV or streaming as it is? Or, hey, maybe 1 to 2 seasons is enough of a stalker man? Max, I'm curious from your perspective.
This is a definite yes for me to want to keep going. I love the tone of it. I love that it feels like TV. But what I mean by that is, like, despite there being a cliffhanger, it feels like we got a full realized arc in this episode, and it's not just trying to do 10-hour movie. I feel like it's well self-contained in there, and I'm definitely curious to see where it goes. It builds incredible suspense and tension, and it feels like it's really going for whatever it is that it's going for. So I'm in. This is a hard in for me. As to the second question, hard to say because I haven't seen any more of it, but something that I do know about You as a whole is that it switches locations every single season. And so I almost feel like as long as you keep finding really interesting self-contained stories in those seasons and it's done effectively, then why not? But yeah, I mean, we want to hear from people who watch this show. Like, is it worth to keep going? Because I'm definitely invested.
Rich, what about you?
I'm saying definitely for continuing to watch it. This is probably the easiest choice I've had to make for a show in quite a while on this. I was definitely it was honestly hard not flipping to episode 2 because I knew I would screw up the plot if I did that. I also think that this style, because it is a little reminiscent of like the Fleabag narrator thing, I think it's going to be best served following the British TV model of 2 seasons and done. I don't think that this particular level of like, kind of like near vigilante serial killer type thing is with like an unending narrator is really served by having that much more of that many more seasons or anything like that. So it's probably good that they're finishing with 5-act play, that kind of thing. Same duration as Breaking Bad and all that. But yeah, I am 100% watching more of this. A friend has described this as a perfect season of TV. This first season here, which I don't get thrown around that often, unless you're talking about Detroiters. And I think it's full steam ahead for me.
And for myself, this is a super easy yes, right? Like, I watched this pilot and I was like, oh, I probably want to watch more, right? As far as watching more of this show, this show continuing, what I want to say is something a little bit different. There have been shows that we've watched in the past where you could just jump in with friends, right? Like you could they'd be like, yeah, we're watching You, come and sit down. Like this is what's happening.
Oh, some real New Yorkers over here watching You.
Yeah, I only watch with my close New Yorker friends.
How did you not know Metro North went through Grand Central?
Fucking moron.
Where'd you get the meatball sub from? If it's not Caramellos, I'll kick your fucking ass.
My family is going to kick my ass for not knowing that Metro North thing. But as far as this is a show that I feel like if you explain to someone, you're like, yeah, it's about this guy who's a stalker and like he follows these women around and like you hear that and you're like, what the fuck are you watching? But I implore people, if you want to watch this show, watch the pilot. Like, really, sit down, watch the pilot, and allow yourself to be engulfed in this universe. And understand, you are not a bad person for siding with Joe sometimes, because there has been a lot of TV where we side with the bad guy in many instances. And I think that this is a great, exciting, different chapter in that series of anti-villains, or anti-heroes, excuse me, that we followed. And maybe it's just enough that we can start having new heroes and new exciting hero arcs to root for sometime soon.
Such a great point. I mean, so like so many different shows have like these brilliant anti-heroes. Tony Soprano, Walter White, Bluey. They're all. It's just a crucial. It is again peak TV doing that to us too. I think that had a massive role to play in it.
So our flight has come to a land, gentlemen. In case people want to find you too, where can they find you? Max, where can folks find you?
You could find me at your local delicatessen ordering up a meatball sub and a cumin-flavored soda, and on all things social media at Maxwell Singh.
Rich, what about you?
You can find me breaking into Barnes & Noble and making them show me the cage. And you can also... You can also find me on Instagram at Damn That's Rich. You can find original sketch comedy for Max and myself on TikTok at Dadwagon Comedy.
And you can find me getting lost in Penn Station asking, can you help me find my train? But you can also find me on social media at Run Jeff Run. You can find the TV Pilots license anywhere you listen to podcasts, as well as social media at TV Pilots License. If you have a question about the show or for our next episode, feel free to shoot us an email at tvpilotslicense@gmail.com or give us a call at 213-290-1713. Make sure to watch out for our Instagram for our upcoming episodes. But with the plane landed and the seatbelt sign off, we look forward to flying the bright skies of the TV world with you again soon. And until then,
mac and cheese.
Jesus Christ.